In 1961, President Kennedy called on all Americans to rise to the challenges of the day. He knew that success depended upon the unity of efforts throughout the federal government and the nation. The Greater Boston Federal Executive Board, one of 28 across the country, fosters communication, coordination, and collaboration with federal, state, and local government agencies. This is your federal government, and I am your host, Diane LeBlanc. Hello, everyone. Today we are featuring the Social Security Administration's Office of the Inspector General's Cooperative Disability Investigations Program. Our guests today are Heather Hermann, who is the National Coordinator for the Cooperative Disability Investigations Program, and Reggie Hammonds, who is the Team Leader for the Boston Cooperative Disability Investigations Unit. Welcome. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Cooperative Disability Investigation Unit. Say that 10 times fast.
Right.
Okay. So, commonly it's referred to
The CDI program.
as the CDI program. Okay.
Right.
So we will use that going forward, the CDI program. I had the pleasure of interviewing for one of our other shows the Inspector General
Right.
for the Social Security Administration, Patrick O'Carroll.
Right.
And as well as the special agent in charge here in the Boston office. And so we talked about the work of the Inspector General's office overall in broad terms, but when we started to focus on disability investigations, I'm like, boy, there's another show there. And so I'm thrilled that you're here today. Let's start off with a little bit of sort of the history of the CDI program.
Sure. Well, thank you for having us.
Yes.
It's a good opportunity to be able to talk about the CDI program and tell you a little bit more about what we do. We started the CDI program in 1998. We started with 5 units spread throughout the country, and today the program's actually grown to 25 units in 21 different states, and our newest unit is in the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So we're now throughout the United States. Some states have a couple different units, so we're really all over. And to highlight the differences between what the Office of the Inspector General does versus the CDI program focuses, like you said, just on disability investigations, and we really like to target the front end of those disability applications, so people who are just in the process of applying for disability.
Okay. So you said you started with 5 units. Was Boston one of the initial 5, or did we sort of
Boston
come
one of the
in
first
somewhere
5?
along the
No,
line?
Boston was not one of the first 5.
Okay.
Boston was started in 2000. That's when they actually started the first unit for here in the New England area.
Okay. So it's interesting, especially in this day and age, budgets being what they are, that there would be a federal entity that's actually growing. But when something sort of, you started in 1998 and you started with 5 and now it's up to 25, right. There's got to be a reason for that, and we'll come back to that a little bit.
Sure.
But so now you talked a little bit about sort of the difference of what the CDI program does, but if you would, what is your mission statement?
The mission is to investigate potentially fraudulent Social Security applications and then provide the results of our investigations to the Social Security Administration and the State Disability Determination Services for them to use in their disability determinations.
Okay. So you said State Disability Determination Services.
Right.
What is that? When did we go from the federal government to the
Sure.
state government?
Each state has their own DDS, or Disability Determination Service, and those services actually do the medical determinations for the Social Security Administration. So while it's a federally funded Social Security benefit, each state has their own state agency who actually assists in making those medical determinations.
Okay. All right. So Reggie, your unit is located in Boston,
That's correct.
and it's called the Boston CDI unit. Is that what it's called?
Yes, that's exactly.
And what is your geographic area of responsibility?
Basically, our geographic area is the state of Massachusetts only.
Okay.
So we just do the state of Mass.
So would there be, again, there's only 25, would we find a unit in another New England state?
Not yet. We're hoping to
Okay.
expand
All right.
to other areas in New England.
All right. So Boston was brought in somewhere along the lines, and this is a partnership. You work with the state, so you work with the folks at the state of Massachusetts, but you also work with state and local law enforcement. Talk to us a little bit about how a unit is set up and who's on it, who's in a unit.
Well, here in Boston, the unit is set up with, you have an OIG agent, a special agent, who is the team leader who oversees the unit.
And that's you.
That is correct. And then you would have one Social Security employee, one DDS employee, the Disability Determination Service employee,
Okay.
and usually there's at least two state or local law enforcement. Here in Boston, we have two state actual investigators that work for us.
So this is your full-time assignment, is the team lead for Boston, or do you sort of do that as a collateral duty and you're doing all sorts of other things that a special agent would do?
Well, normally this is my full-time job, but every now and then, if my supervisor calls me up, I will actually go out and work a case for the OIG side of the house.
Okay, so there was yourself, there was the person representing the state,
Correct.
and then there were two investigators,
Two actual state investigators.
plus a Social Security Administration employee.
Yes, that is correct.
So a total of 5 on your team. Are those details for those individuals? Do they come and do they spend 3 months with you or 6 months with you, or is it a 12-month commitment, or is this it for them for the rest of their career?
Well, it all depends on the agency. We have an agreement with each agency that basically, like for example, our DDS employee, she's been with the Boston office roughly since the unit started. The SSA personnel she's fairly new. She's been there since May. She switched out with another individual who was there for approximately 3 years. Okay. So that's kind of a rotating cycle. And the investigators are usually there until the AG's office decides that they want to withdraw them and put in new individuals, give someone else a chance to actually do the investigative side with the federal government.
Okay. Heather, when I was doing a little bit of sort of background research for today's show, I read that this program gets involved in investigating, is it Title II and Title 17?
Title 16.
Title 16, okay.
Right.
So what's the difference between those two
Sure.
entities or those two components?
Basically, Title II is the insurance system that all Americans who are working pay into. Title 16 is for indigent individuals who have not paid into the insurance program under Title II. So it's a matter of whether you've paid in through your federal taxes or whether you've never been able to have a job or haven't been employed long enough to have coverage under the insurance system.
Okay. So I think you also said that the CDI program, for the most part, gets involved at doing your work on the front end of the process.
Right.
Somebody applies for a disability benefit.
Right.
Okay. And so does your office or this program, does it review every application that comes
No.
through the door? Or so how is your workload determined?
Sure. Most of our allegations come from the state DDSs, but we also get some from Social Security, and we also get a decent amount of allegations from private individuals, neighbors who know that their their neighbor is applying for disability and also know that they're working under the table or those kinds of things. But we find that the vast majority of our allegations do come from the DDSs because they're really the stage where they see what the applicant is claiming and they can compare it to the medical evidence that they're also reviewing for those disability applications. And when they compare those two things and things aren't adding up, that's when they start to wonder if there's some fraudulent activity going on, and that's usually when the CDI program would get involved. They would actually make the referral to the CDI unit, either by calling Reggie or one of the other team leaders, or by sending something through the Social Security's electronic allegation referral process.
Okay. So you're the national coordinator for the program, and again,
Right.
25 units across the country. Can you sort of quantify your workload?
We quantify our workload by the projected savings that we're contributing to. So, for example, I'll tell you in fiscal year 2013, the CDI program estimates that we contributed to saving the Social Security Administration almost $340 million. So we have a formula that we use for every case that we participate in where benefits are not awarded. We have a specific formula that we kind of assign a monetary amount to that as our projected savings amount.
Okay. So that's a tremendous benefit, obviously, to the American people. That's a cost avoidance.
Right.
So what you're doing is you're looking at the case on the front end, and you're going back and saying, here's the work that we did, and this is why this person shouldn't be able to sort of become part of the system and get this benefit.
Sure.
But every case that comes to you is part of your workload. How many cases do you manage?
I'm gonna let
Reggie says
Reggie
a lot.
in a typical
or
month.
at the Boston office. I
Yeah.
mean, what is?
Annually, you're looking at close to about 200 cases per year.
Okay.
A typical month, probably about 20 cases.
Okay. So obviously you're getting those referrals, as Heather said, they could come from a variety of sources. Social Security Administration employee, they could come from the state folks who've looked at something, or from, a private citizen.
Exactly.
who's sending you a referral. And I'm guessing that there's some sort of, how do you prioritize your cases?
Well, basically, as they come in, I look at the allegations when they come in. At that point, I'll look at it and see if it's a case that we actually should be working, if it's something that we may be able to prove that there may be fraud being committed. I will have my two staff members, the Social Security SSA employee and the DDS employee, review that allegation. And from both sides, they look at it from the DDS's side of the house and the SSA side of the house to figure out whether or not, this really is something that we believe someone may be committing fraud. And if they say, yes, I think this is a good case work, then I will open the case up and then I will assign it to one of the investigators.
So what does an investigation look like? Is it looking at that paperwork and, working the phones and calling people? Is it saying, you know what, we're going to go follow this person? How do you do your work?
Well, it all depends on the investigation. A typical investigation would be basically doing a normal background check, following up to see what the allegation is involved, what it involves in regards to the allegation. Say, for example, say the allegation says someone is applying for benefits and they're claiming that they have a bad back and they need a cane to assist them in walking, but yet when they applied for benefits at the Social Security office and they walked out of the office, one of the employees noticed that the person took the cane and broke it in half and threw it in the trash. So then we would actually look into what's happening with that case in regards to maybe doing some surveillance to see if the person's using the cane on a daily basis or not.
Okay. So you said maybe in a typical month, an average of 20 cases that come to you because there was some level of suspicion, there was a red flag, so to speak. So that casework came to you. I guess a question for both of you, maybe in terms of the Boston office, of those 20, is there sort of an average percentage on a monthly basis that, 10 of them were, proven to be fraudulent claims for benefits, or?
I would say 8, 9 times out of 10, because what we do is we rely heavily on the individual, or excuse me, my staff and the individual who's supplying the allegation to us, because usually it's an SSA or a DDS employee who have the experience, like Heather was saying, their expertise, they're sending that because they believe that there may be fraud being committed. So then, of course, with the Social Security employee and a DDS employee at the CDI unit, we also rely on their expertise. And by combining all of that, 8, 9 times out of 10.
So it's a very high percentage. It's much greater
It is a high
than
percentage.
50%. And Heather, that sort of plays out nationwide?
It does, it does. And like Reggie was saying, we have the various agencies involved, and we get a very high level of expertise to know what cases we should actually look into versus what cases the claimant probably really is disabled. So we're very selective when we decide whether or not to open an investigation. The amount of allegations that we receive compared to the amount of disability applications nationwide, our investigations are just a tiny drop in the bucket compared to all the applications that we get nationwide. So we really have to focus our investigations on those where there really are specific things that need to be answered, specific concerns that the that the DDS examiners have questions on, so that we can really pinpoint the information we need to supply, what can we assist the decision makers with, what information can we obtain for them.
So as we were talking about earlier, we're very fortunate to have a CDI unit here in Boston, and they look at the entire state of Massachusetts. So any claims that might come that way, but the other New England states don't have a CDI unit. So if there were a Social Security Administration employee who saw an application for benefits, and they just knew something wasn't right, how would that be handled in those other states?
They could still refer those allegations to the Office of the Inspector General, and the Office of the Inspector General does their very best to take a look at everything they can. Unfortunately, given staff sizes and resources, we can't open every single investigation. There are times when a unit, and I don't know that this has happened in Boston, but there are times when a unit will be called to go beyond their state lines to look at something happening in another state, but it would have to rise to the level where we would need to do that. But we do, if an allegation is submitted, someone at the Office of the Inspector General will be looking at it and trying to give it as much attention as we can.
Okay, so it might not necessarily be the CDI unit,
Right.
but if there's an allegation of fraud, it will get some level of checking
reviewed.
out.
Right, it'll be reviewed.
Okay, all right. So what are the techniques that are used by your investigators, without giving away, your secrets? I mean, is it just, good old-fashioned detective work, or what techniques do you all use?
Well, basically that's what it is. It's going out, doing surveillance, using resource databases that we have, and doing good old-fashioned interviewing, using interviewing skills, being able to sit down with the individual who you're investigating, and when you conduct the interview, being able to bring out and show out points to them that, hey, you may have falsified here on this application. And usually most individuals you're dealing with, when they realize that, oh, okay, maybe I might have not been quite truthful on that application. Okay, yeah, you got me. And then next thing you know, you have someone actually telling you the truth compared to, well, I shouldn't say the truth, telling you basically the opposite of what they told the Social Security employee, but telling the investigator the truth at the very end.
So after you get the referral, you do some level of investigation, enough to really sort of confirm the suspicions of the entity that sent it to you in the first place, and then you actually go back to the individual who made the request or the claim for benefits, and you have a conversation? Is that part of every case?
No.
And different units work differently. It really depends on the individual unit, the different law enforcement partners involved, and what their style, what their techniques typically are. In Boston, they tend to do a lot of that where they actually go back and interview the applicant and see what he has to say. Other units will rarely interview the applicant, and that, you know, just again depends on the investigators who are involved, what their style is. Also what the application says. If we feel like we're really going to get a lot out of going to speak with someone, then usually the unit will do that. If the allegation was that they have mental problems and can't form a sentence and can't interact with people, there's a lot to be gained by going out and talking to them face to face, and so the investigators will do that. But if it's mostly a physical disability where someone's claiming that they have back problems and they always need to use a cane to walk, we're probably going to be able to get the best information either by observing them or interviewing neighbors or local gas stations or the local grocery stores who might recognize those people and be able to tell us whether or not they use canes or wheelchairs or walkers when they come in.
So you do your work, you do your investigation, and then who do you go back to? Who ultimately gives the individual the bad news that you caught them on videotape dancing?
Well, like Heather said, it all depends on the unit. Here in Boston, basically, if we're interviewing the individual, we will actually tell them right then and there that, listen, you know, you weren't quite honest on your application that you submitted to Social Security, and we're here to basically tie up the loose ends. And you know, we will write up our report of our findings, and we only state just the facts, and we provide those facts to Social Security and DDS.
And does every case that comes to your attention result in an actual written report?
Yeah, every case that we open will end in a report of investigation, and like Reggie said, those reports are supplied either to the Social Security Administration or the DDS, or both, depending on which agency has jurisdiction to make the decision. And they review our reports and compare that with all the other facts that are in support of that application. And so the agency makes the determination. The CDI program, we're just the fact finders, just doing the investigative process and then turning over the results of the investigation.
So in terms of your nationwide program, the work of the 25 units, you shared, I mean, really an astounding number relative to the cost avoidance. These are folks who, because of the work that you do, they're denied the benefit. What does that number look like here for the Boston unit? Do we have that figure? Do we know that figure, the cost avoidance because of the work done here in Boston?
In 2013, the Boston CDI unit saved approximately about $23,500,000 to the Social Security.
In 1 year?
In 1 year.
And that's based upon the work of 5 individuals?
That is correct.
So again, as we mentioned, you know, budget realities of the federal government, they are what they are, and resources are limited, and clearly the taxpayers, you know, have a right to want to know how their money is being used and what the benefit is. But this is a case where, for a very small investment, there's a very, very large return.
It's a big return, and
Yeah.
nationally our return on investment is about $16 being returned for every $1 that we spend on the program.
Okay. So 25 units today, are there plans to expand the program?
We are hoping to expand the program. We currently, SSA agreed to add about 7 new units, trying to at least get those units started this fiscal year. Doesn't mean they're going to be up and running this fiscal year, but we're looking to expand by at least 7 this year. And Congress has indicated that they'd like a unit in every state, so we're hoping that on the horizon we'll be expanding into every state.
And again, you know, there's always more to something that meets the eye, but certainly on the surface, this is one of those things that I would call a no-brainer. So that's very, very interesting. Reggie, how long have you been with the Boston office?
Since September 2003.
And were you with the Office of the Inspector General before that?
No, before that I was with the Department of Commerce, NOAA, Office of Law Enforcement.
Okay, so you've got a law enforcement background. Sort of, what's your educational background? I mean, how does somebody train to do what you do?
Well, prior to that, I was in the United States Air Force as a security policeman,
There
did
you
10
go.
years there and traveled abroad and so forth. It all depends. Everyone's different. Some, you know, with bachelor's degrees in criminal justice, some with master's degrees, and some, you know, who work with different agencies where they get experience, and some, of course, with law enforcement.
Interesting. Heather, how about you?
I started with a Social Security Inspector General in 2001 and actually started in New Jersey. Spent several years there as the CDI team leader, and then went to Denver, Colorado, and was the team leader there in Denver for several years, and now I've been here at Social Security headquarters for 2.5 years.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so in terms of the caseload, I want to just come back to that. I know that it's the Social Security Administration that sort of defines the parameters. What constitutes a disability? What are the circumstances under which somebody can file for a benefit? And the reality is we want individuals who should be getting this benefit to get the benefit.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, if somebody legitimately meets the criteria, we want them to get the benefit. But I mean, things like back injury, things like mental illness, those are not always easy to prove or easy to disprove. How would you categorize your workload? I mean, of those 20 cases that are coming to you, are, you know, 50% of them bad backs, or can you break that down?
Well, there's such a huge mixture. I mean, you'll have individuals with bad backs, some with, like you say, the mental issues, others where basically depression, anxiety, and there's just so many. I mean, to actually say, you know, 50% would be bad back, I couldn't say.
Heather, on a sort of a national level, do you, you know, systematically, annually sort of do some sort of, you know, at least high-level review of your cases to
Right.
say they're falling into this category or this category?
What we have done is take a look at whether they tend to fall into the physical category versus the mental category. And what we're finding is that most people nowadays are actually, at least the cases that we review, most people are claiming both. It's almost a two-pronged approach where people will say, I'm physically disabled because I have a bad back or you know, a brain injury or something physical that happened, but because of that, I'm also depressed and I'm also anxious, and it's the combination of the two. And it definitely poses a challenge for us because, as we were talking about our investigative techniques earlier, you really have to approach all the investigations from both of those angles now, where you really have to get at the mental side of what people are claiming and the physical side.
So when an individual makes a claim for benefits or puts in an application for benefits, do they not have to submit some sort of medical evidence, a statement from a doctor? Is that not part of sort of every request for benefits that you would receive?
It typically is, and that's often where we become involved. If someone is claiming that they have a real disability, something that's at the level of meeting the Social Security guidelines and definition of disability, but they don't have that medical information to support that, that would be a good example of where the CDI unit would get involved. Or if they have, you know, if they're claiming that their daily activity level is so poor, yet their doctor's reports don't necessarily support that their disability is that far progressed.
Okay. So you do your investigations, you write your report, and then they use the facts. You say you just provide the facts. They use the facts to make the ultimate determination to give the benefit or to deny the benefit. And you said, you know, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, these individuals are being denied. Is there ever a penalty? Does it ever come back to the individual where, I mean, they made false statements on a government application for benefits? They're trying to take money from the American people that they're not entitled to. So what's the penalty for that?
Sure. Well, there are a decent amount of cases every year that get prosecuted throughout the country. One of our challenges is that there isn't a monetary loss. We can say, yes, there's this cost avoidance, and people are making false statements, but without a monetary loss to the government, it's sometimes a challenge to get those cases prosecuted. But what we have occasionally instituted instead of the prosecutions is a civil monetary penalty, and our Office of Counsel to the Inspector General actually imposes those civil monetary penalties. So for every false statement that someone makes, our counsel can actually impose a $5,000 penalty. So those can start to add up as well. And I also want to point out that there are times when there may be exaggerations, but there might not be an actual false statement, and those are the cases that we probably look at, you know, at least 50% of the time, where someone's exaggerating, but they haven't lied about not working, for example. They say, I haven't worked, and maybe they haven't been working, but they're exaggerating the extent of their disability, and there aren't actual clear-cut false statements that we could pursue.
So perhaps somebody might have a bad back, or they might have a mental illness, but it might not be debilitating.
Right.
It might be a situation where if they wanted to get up and,
Right.
and go do something,
Right.
they could
Exactly.
earn income.
And we all know people who have certain levels of disabilities who still join the workforce,
Sure.
and who, you know, reasonable
Absolutely.
accommodations are made every day for people who go out and work with a
Right.
variety of disabilities.
Absolutely.
So that's really where the CDI program gets involved, is to help determine what their actual level of functioning is.
So in terms of, are the majority of cases that you're investigating, they're cases that go back to the individual? Again, I was reading that you investigate third-party fraud, where doctors are involved and lawyers are involved. Can you talk about that and maybe give us some case examples?
Sure. Part of the CDI mission is to investigate third-party facilitators or organized disability fraud, and doctors and attorneys and sometimes even judges do become involved in that. We would typically be investigating large schemes where an attorney, for example, was dealing with an entire, maybe a population, entire ethnic population, assisting them to get on benefits. Those kinds of schemes is what the CDI program would look at. And we have had some of those cases throughout the country. There was recently a case in New York where police officers were actually receiving disability benefits, and there were attorneys involved in that disability ring. Also had a recent case in Puerto Rico where I think approximately 80 arrests were made, people
Wow.
who were involved in disability fraud. So we do investigate those third-party facilitators. Those are obviously much bigger investigations, take a longer, much longer
Sure.
time to investigate. So it's certainly one of our priorities, but probably not the bulk of the work that the CDI units do.
Reggie, you've been in Boston for a while. Since you've been there, is there any particular case that stands out for you in particular?
Oh, wow. So many. One that really stands out is we were investigating a gentleman who supposedly had a bad back and needed a cane to assist him in walking on a daily basis. And word got out that he wasn't disabled, so the case came to the unit, and we went out and we started doing surveillance, and then we found out that, hey, we heard that he referees basketball games. So turn around, we actually went to the games, and there he was running up and down the court, blowing the whistle. So of course it was denied, but it just stands out because his back was so severe, he was going to need surgery.
Debilitating. Yeah, if you have a debilitating back injury, you don't usually ref basketball games. So I think we've made it clear that the majority of your work is done reviewing things on the front end. But what if a benefit is given, and then somehow it comes to your attention that you've given this person a benefit and they are out, refereeing basketball games or hockey games or whatever? Could your office get involved on the back end? How would that work?
We definitely do get involved in those, and if the CDI unit in that particular location didn't want to get involved, they could always ask the Office of the Inspector General agents to take a look at that. So absolutely, whether people are in the process of applying for disability benefits or whether they're already on disability benefits, if there's an allegation that they shouldn't be receiving those, that they're actually not disabled, one way or the other, the Office of the Inspector General would take a look at it.
Now, if somebody sort of has been receiving the benefits, it's, you put together the facts, and the facts show that, again, this person has no disability. Clearly, they've been taking money. Are the penalties then more severe? Do they need to pay that money back? What happens?
If we pursued a criminal prosecution and they actually established an overpayment, we would absolutely ask for restitution for that money that was overpaid to them.
And Reggie, in your office, do you ever get any of those cases that you're doing sort of on the back end?
Right now, we're basically working the initial claims cases on the front end, but the ones that we do see like that, we normally pass over to OIG.
So for anybody who might be watching that knows that their neighbor doesn't go to work, but they see them out there and they're, pruning trees and, climbing fences, and they've heard that maybe they get a government check because they're disabled, but they've seen them, on the baseball field, or they've seen them whatever. What can our viewers who maybe suspect a fraud do? How can they report this?
They can go to our website.
Okay.
They can also call. We have a fraud hotline. They can call that hotline and report it. They can even go to their local Social Security office or to their local DDS and report those kinds of things. I want to make clear that the vast majority of the people who apply for benefits deserve them and need them. But that's why we do want to investigate the people who aren't entitled to them, to make sure that that money is there for the people who do need it.
So you could actually, go online and there's some sort of a form to fill out to make okay.
Right, there's a fraud referral form online. It'll ask some basic questions. You can remain anonymous. You don't have to give your information. And basically ask some questions about the person that you believe is receiving benefits and what you think they're doing.
Oh, okay. Anything, what have we not told our viewers about the CDI program, or perhaps the people who, work for the CDI unit across the country?
Well, I think it's important to note that it really is a cooperative effort. Each agency involved brings their own expertise, and they really are experts in their own areas. So without the participation of all the different agencies, the units wouldn't be as successful as they are.
So we've talked about, your major partnerships and what constitutes a CDI unit, and they all have some basic commonalities, some basic components. But are there other partners that you work with? Are there other federal agencies that you would work with or potentially bring in?
We do occasionally work with other agencies, especially on our third-party facilitator fraud investigations. We definitely work with some of the other federal agencies. The FBI is involved in those cases occasionally. Medicaid fraud control units would be involved with those. On a state and local viewpoint, we work with many Attorney General's offices, many of the State Bureau of Investigations, and we also partner with some of the county sheriff's offices or police departments throughout the country.
So the message to our viewers, this is a benefit that's there for those that need it, but if you don't need it, you shouldn't apply?
Absolutely.
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 All right. Any last words for our viewers, Reggie?
No, I think Heather summarized it all up. It's just, if you're applying for benefits, the benefits are there for those who have earned, who deserve the benefits. And, that's what we're here for.
You need to be honest, because there are penalties for, making false claims.
Right.
And you did indicate that some members of Congress would be interested in seeing a CDI unit in every state.
Right.
In terms of the plans for the office, the future of the CDI unit, do you think that that's a realistic expectation?
I think at some point in the future that could happen. I think we're a ways away from that. But I think it's a possibility. I think every state currently has a disability determination service. So, if you're looking at it from that perspective, it would make sense to have a CDI unit available for them to refer suspicious claims to.
Terrific. Well, this has been very, very informative.
Great. Thank you for having us.
So I want to thank our guests for being with us today. and for helping us to better understand the work of the Cooperative Disability Investigations Program, CDI, and their role in protecting the public's interest. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you will continue to join us as we feature other federal agencies on your federal government.